Number 10 sits on a dusty plain 60 miles north of Delhi, and the date is January 14th, 1761. The Third Battle of Panipat. Ahmad Shah Abdali, king of the Afghans, has crossed the Khyber Pass with an army the size of a nation. Facing him is Sadashivrao Bao, cousin to the ruling Peshwa commanding the Northern Expeditionary Force of the Maratha Confederacy, the most powerful indigenous state in India. Bao has come with something no Indian army has fielded before: French-supplied artillery, European drill, 55,000 Maratha cavalry, 9,000 Gardi infantry trained in continental fashion, and a mile-long camp of pilgrims, servants, wives, and children, numbering in the hundreds of thousands. This is not a raid. This is not a campaign. This is a Maratha nation on the march. And Bao intends to break the Afghan invasion once and for all. Ahmad Shah Abdali has 41,800 Afghan cavalry, 32,000 Rohilla infantry under Najib Udala, and 4,000 Kumaoni foot. He has 2,000 camel-mounted swivel guns called Zambarak that can fire on the move, and he has a heavy-mounted artillery train that will change the nature of the battle. For 2 months, the two armies stare at each other across the plain. Bao digs a fortified camp, Abdali cuts his supply lines, grain runs out, horses are eaten, camp followers begin dying of starvation inside the Maratha lines. On the night of January 13th, Bao makes his decision: fight in the morning, or watch his army disintegrate in the frost. At 9 in the morning, on January 14th, the Maratha guns open on the Afghan center. For 3 hours, it looks like Bao will win. His French-supplied cannon pound Rohilla infantry into the mud. His Gardi musketeers advance in lines that would not have looked out of place at Fontenoy. Vishwas Rao, the heir to the Maratha throne, 17 years old, rides at the head of the personal guard and drives the Afghan center backwards. Then, at midday, a musket ball takes Vishwas Rao through the head. Word runs through the Maratha lines that the prince is dead. Bao dismounts, throws himself onto his own horse, and charges into the swirl to be killed alongside his nephew. Command breaks. The center wavers. Abdali, watching from a distance behind his own lines, releases his reserve. 15,000 fresh Afghan and Rohilla horsemen, hidden until this exact moment, thunder into the sagging Maratha center. The Zambarak camels open at close range. The line does not break. The line dissolves. What follows in the afternoon is not a battle, it is an execution. Tens of thousands of Marathas die on that field between noon and dusk. The pursuit runs for miles. Camp followers, women, children, elderly pilgrims, are ridden down by Afghan cavalry until the horses are too tired to keep killing. The next morning, on Abdali's orders, roughly 40,000 Maratha prisoners are put to the sword in cold blood. Contemporary chronicles record 32 heaps of bodies stacked on the battlefield. Between the fighting, the pursuit, the executions, and the pilgrims, cut down in the flight the death toll from that one day, and its aftermath is estimated by the historian Shea Walker at 100,000. It is very possibly the deadliest single day of 18th century warfare on Earth. Cannae killed 60,000 to 70,000 Romans in a day. Panipat killed more than that before lunch was cold. And that is only number 10. Number 9 does not have the raw death toll of Panipat, but it changed the world in a way none of the other battles on this list can match. The date is July 751 AD. The location is a river valley on the border of what is now Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, near the town of Talas. And what makes this battle astonishing is not just its size, it is the fact that it happened at all. This is the only battle ever fought between the Arab Caliphate and Imperial China, the two greatest civilizations on Earth at that moment, separated by 5,000 miles of steppe and desert and mountain met on this river once and only once. The Tang Dynasty is at the absolute peak of its power. Emperor Shanzong sits in Chang'an, ruling a population that dwarfs anything in Europe. Tang armies have pushed westward for a century, absorbing the oasis kingdoms of the Tarim Basin, projecting influence in the Sogdiana, extracting tribute from cities the Greeks once knew. Their commander in Central Asia is a Korean-born general named Gao Xianjir, one of the great mountain warfare commanders of the ancient world, a man who has already led an army over the Pamirs at 15,000 feet to punish Tibetan client states. The Abbasid Caliphate is not quite 1 year old. The Abbasid Revolution has just torn down the Umayyads and installed a new Arab dynasty that will build Baghdad and preside over the golden age of Islamic science. Their governor in Khorasan, Abu Muslim, has dispatched a commander named Ziyad ibn Salih westward with a Muslim army supported by Tibetan allies and thousands of Turkic Karluks. Sources disagree on numbers, but the Chinese estimate the Abbasid coalition at up to 200,000 men. The Arabs put the Tang force at 100,000. Modern historians consider both figures inflated, but even the conservative estimates put tens of thousands on each side on a battlefield 5,000 miles from Chang'an and nearly as far from Damascus. For 5 days, the two armies fight along the banks of the Talas. Gao Shenji's Tang crossbowmen tear holes in Abbasid formations. Arab cavalry probes the Chinese flanks. Neither side can break the other. And then on the 5th day, the Karluks defect. 20,000 Turkic horsemen who had been fighting on the Tang side suddenly wheel and attack the Chinese from the rear. Caught between the Abbasid front and the Karluk lances, the Tang line disintegrates. Gao Shanjir cuts his way out with a fraction of his men. The rest are killed or captured, and among the captured are craftsmen, silk weavers, painters, goldsmiths, and papermakers. The papermakers are the reason Talas matters more than its casualty list. Within a few years, paper mills are operating in Samarkand, then Baghdad, then Damascus, then Cairo, then Fez, then Cordoba, then by way of Sicily and Spain, all of Europe. The Renaissance is unthinkable without paper. The printing press has nothing to press upon without paper. The scientific revolution, the Reformation, modern bureaucracy, the entire architecture of the Western literate world descends in part from prisoners taken on a riverbank in the summer of 751. The Tang never returned to Central Asia in force. The Karluks converted to Islam. The border between the Chinese and the Islamic spheres of influence would harden along roughly the line the battle marked. The steppe went Muslim, and paper went west. One battle, 5 days. And the entire trajectory of civilization rerouted through a couple of captured craftsmen who happened to know how to macerate hemp and mulberry bark into pulp. That is why Talas ranks 9. Number 8 is a battle that decided the fate of an empire in a single morning, and it did so with an army so small it should not have won at all. The date is May 28, 621 AD. The place is Hulao Pass, a narrow defile east of Luoyang where the plains of Hainan squeeze up against a low range of mountains. The commander is Li Shimin, 22 years old, prince of the new Tang dynasty, a man who will one day become Emperor Taizong II and preside over the greatest Golden Age imperial China would ever know. But that is later. On this morning, Li Shimin is not an emperor. He is a young general commanding roughly 3,500 elite cavalry, and he is about to fight an enemy army 100,000 strong. The Sui dynasty has collapsed. Warlords are carving up China. Li Shimin's family, the Tang, control the northwest. Wang Shichong, a general who has crowned himself emperor of a rump state called Zheng, controls Luoyang. Du Jiande, the peasant-born ruler of the Shai in Hebei, controls the northeast. For months, Li Shimin has been besieging Wang Shichong inside Luoyang. Starvation has hollowed the city. A piece of silk trades for 3 liters of grain. Then Wang Shichong makes his desperate move. He appeals to Du Jiande for help. Du marches west with an army variously estimated at between 100,000 and 120,000 men. Li Shimin's generals urge retreat. He refuses. He splits his force. He leaves his brother Li Yuanji with the bulk of the army to maintain the siege of Luoyang. He takes 3,500 elite cavalry, including a special forces unit of 1,000 heavy horsemen in black lamellar armor called the Wanja, and races east to plug the Hulao Pass before Du Jiande can get through. Du arrives with his massive army and encamps on the plain of Shishui. For over a month, the two forces stare at each other. Li Shimin refuses to be drawn out. He raids Du's supply lines. He sends small parties across the river at night to burn forage. He wants Dao's men tired, hungry, and irritable. And then, on May 28, he plays his masterstroke. He orders his horses driven to the north bank to graze in full view of Du's camp, giving the appearance that his cavalry is dispersed. Du Jiande takes the bait. He forms up his entire army and marches out to attack. From dawn to noon, they stand in the sun in full armor waiting for the Tang to break. By midday, They are drinking their water rations, sitting down in ranks, unbuckling helmets. Du Jiande himself is holding an impromptu court with his ministers when Li Shimin's cavalry appears at full gallop, having recalled the horses and formed for battle in the time it took the Xia army to lose its edge. The Xuanjia hit first. 1,000 armored horsemen driving into a formation that is not quite standing, not quite sitting, not quite ready. The rear ranks of the Xia try to form up. The middle ranks are still fumbling with helmet straps. Li Shimin himself, at the head of a picked squadron, punches straight through the Xia lines and plants Tang banners on the eastern ridge overlooking Du Jiande's entire army. When the Xia soldiers turn and see Tang banners behind them, they assume they are surrounded. The whole force disintegrates. The pursuit runs for 30 miles. 3,000 Xia die on the field. Over 50,000 surrender. Du Jiande himself is wounded, captured, trying to swim the Yellow River, and executed a few months later. When Li Shimin rides back to the walls of Luoyang and parades Du Jiande in a caged wagon before the gates, Wang Shicheng surrenders on the spot. In one morning, in one pass, with 3,500 men against 100,000, Li Shimin has broken the two most powerful warlords in China and effectively won the Chinese Civil War. The Tang would go on to rule China for nearly 3 centuries. All of it hinged on one exhausted afternoon at Hulao Pass. Cannae was 40,000 well-drilled Carthaginians against 80,000 Romans, roughly 1 to 2. Hulao was 3,500 against 100,000, closer to 1 to 30. And it won not a battle, but a dynasty. Number 7 takes us back to the 4th century and to a story so bizarre it sounds invented. The date is November 383 AD. The place is the Fei River in what is now Anhui province. The invader is Fu Jian, the second emperor of the former Chinadi ethnic ruler who has conquered every kingdom in northern China and now stands ready to swallow the last Chinese state south of the Yangtze. He is 45 years old, a genuinely capable ruler, admired even by his enemies, and he has mustered the largest army the medieval world had ever seen up to that moment. The numbers reported by the Book of Jin are staggering. Fu Jian mobilizes 6 out of every 10 able-bodied men in northern China. 30,000 elite palace guards called the Yulin Lang serve as his personal escort. His brother Fu Rong marches ahead with a vanguard of 300,000. Fu Jian himself marches from Chang'an with 270,000 cavalry and 600,000 infantry. The total claimed force is roughly 870,000 men. Modern historians reduce those figures. They point out that only 250,000 to 300,000 could have engaged at Fei River at once. The rest are strung out for 300 miles across the North Chinese plain, still en route from distant provinces. But even the low estimates give Fu Jian a numerical advantage of somewhere between 3 to 1 and 5 to 1 over the defending Eastern Jin dynasty in the south, which fields the elite Beifu Corps under the general Xie Xuan, roughly 80,000 men. Fu Jian himself is unworried. On the eve of the campaign, he tells his court that his army is so vast his soldiers could throw their whips into the Yangtze and dam its flow. That phrase becomes a Chinese idiom. Overconfidence? Given a specific date. The former Qin vanguard reaches the Fei River in October. Fu Jian rides forward with 8,000 light cavalry to see the terrain and immediately gets ambushed. Xie Xuan sends 5,000 elite troops against the leading Qin force and kills 15,000 in a sharp opening blow. Fu Jian, shaken, climbs a wall of the town of Shouyang to look out at the enemy positions and, in one of the most famous moments in Chinese military history, mistakes the swaying grass on distant hills for enemy soldiers. He turns to his brother and says, "The Jin are much more numerous than he thought. The propaganda campaign has begun to work on the man running it." Then comes the moment that gives Fei River its permanent place in the ranking of impossible defeats. Xie Xuan sends a messenger across the river with an audacious request. He asks Fu Jian to pull his army back slightly, just enough to allow the Jin to cross and fight a decisive battle on the near bank. Fu Jian sees his chance. He plans to attack while the Jin are half across, cut them apart in the water. He orders his army to take 1 step backward. That is the plan. 1 step, just enough to give ground for the enemy to cross. 1 ordered step backward. It becomes a rumor. The rumor becomes a shout. Someone in the rear ranks, A defector or panicked officer cries out that the front is broken and the Jin have won. The rumor sweeps through 300,000 men in the time it takes to draw a breath. The Qin army does not retreat, it routs, it stampedes. Men throw down weapons, officers cannot restore order. The Jin, seeing their opponents dissolving before their eyes, pour across the river and hit the collapsing mass in the flank. Fu Rong, Fu Jian's brother, is killed trying to rally them. The pursuit runs through the night. Sources say Qin soldiers were so terrified that the wind in the pines and the cry of cranes sounded to them like the Jin army in pursuit. That phrase also becomes a Chinese idiom. Fu Jian himself is wounded and escapes with a few thousand men. The former Qin Empire, which had taken 30 years to build, evaporates in a matter of months. Rebellions break out from every conquered people, the Shanbei Revolt, the Qiang Revolt. Fu Jian is killed by his own former general, Yao Chang. 2 years later, northern China dissolves into 16 kingdoms. Southern China survives as a Chinese dynasty for another 2 centuries. All because 800,000 men took one step backward and misheard it as a rout. That is number 7, an empire that killed itself with a rumor. Number 6 is where naval warfare enters this list, and it does so on the greatest river in the world. The date is the winter of 208 amps D. The place is a stretch of the middle Yangtze that history would remember as Chibi, the Red Cliffs. And the man who has come to conquer southern China once and for all is Cao Cao, warlord of the north, the greatest military politician of the late Han Dynasty, a man whose name Chinese speakers still associate with ruthless competence 18 centuries later. Cao Cao has consolidated the entire North China plain. He has taken Jing province from the heirs of Liu Biao without a fight and inherited its enormous naval base at Jiangling with hundreds of warships and tens of thousands of trained sailors. Now he moves down the Yangtze to finish the last 2 southern warlords, Liu Bei, the poor relation claimant to the imperial throne, and Sun Quan, the young ruler of the southeast. Cao Cao writes to Sun Quan boasting that he leads 800,000 men. The number is inflated, as Cao Cao's numbers always are. The southern general Zhou Yu, weighing intelligence reports, estimates the real strength at 220,000 to 240,000 men. Even trimmed, it is the largest force ever committed to a river campaign in Chinese history. Sun Quan and Liu Bei ally against him. Zhou Yu commands the combined southern fleet, roughly 30,000 marines. Liu Bei can bring 20,000 more. Total southern strength does not reach 50,000. The odds are in the range of 4 or 5 to 1. And Cao Cao's problems have already begun. His northern troops, unused to the humid south, are dropping to disease. Many have never been on a ship. To settle them and prevent seasickness, Cao Cao orders his ships chained together in floating platforms lashed prow to stern. It looks brilliant. His men can walk between vessels as if on land. What he has actually done is turn hundreds of ships into a single enormous target. The southern admiral Huang Gai, a veteran with a face like weathered oak, sees it. He proposes to Zhou Yu that they attempt a fire attack. A letter is sent to Cao Cao. Huang Gai claims he wishes to defect. Cao Cao, always predisposed to believe that his opponents will crumble in the face of his power, agrees. On the appointed night, Huang Gai leads 10 ships across the river toward the chained northern fleet. Each ship is loaded to the gunwales with dry reeds, wood, oil-soaked cloth. Behind each ship trails a smaller boat for the crew to escape into. As the ships approach the middle of the Yangtze, the southeasterly wind rises. Huang Gai lights his cargo. His men leap into the escape boats. And 10 walls of flame, wind-driven, ram straight into Cao Cao's chained fleet. The chains that had steadied the northern ships now doom them. The fire runs from vessel to vessel, faster than men can hack the chains apart. Horses stabled on deck panic and throw men into the water. The wind carries burning debris into the camp on the northern shore. The reeds along the bank catch. Then the tents, then the supply wagons. Zhou Yu and Liu Bei's forces, waiting in the darkness, hit the shore under cover of the flames. What follows is chaos on a scale that would be hard to overstate. Tens of thousands of Cao Cao's soldiers burn or drown or are cut down in the mud. Cao Cao, seeing the situation as hopeless, orders his remaining ships destroyed to keep them out of enemy hands and begins a bitter retreat overland through swamps that kill more of his men through disease and exhaustion. He will return north with a fraction of the army he brought. Red Cliffs decides the Three Kingdoms period. Cao Cao's northern state, later Wei, would remain the strongest, but it would never again come close to unifying China in his lifetime. His son would inherit a divided country. Sun Quan would consolidate the southeast as the state of Wu, Liu Bei would take Sichuan and found the state of Shuhan. For the next 60 years, China would be three kingdoms instead of one, all because a wind changed direction on a winter night and 10 fire ships hit a chain. Cannae killed men in an afternoon. Red Cliffs killed a plan for the unification of Asia in a few hours. That is number 6. Number 5 is the battle that made a peasant into an emperor. And it did so with odds so absurd that later Chinese chroniclers had to invent portents in the sky to explain how it happened. The date is June 23 AD. The place is the walled town of Kunyang in Henan. The commander of the defense is Lu Shu, roughly 28 years old, a distant relative of the fallen Han imperial house, currently serving as a mid-ranking rebel officer in the coalition against the usurper Wang Mang. The size of Lu Shu's force is roughly 8,000 to 10,000 men. The size of the imperial army, marching to crush them, is claimed by the Book of Han at 430,000. Even conservative sources put it at 100,000 or more. Under any set of numbers, this is a battle in which the defender is outnumbered somewhere between 10 to 1 and 40 to 1. The imperial commanders Wang Yi and Wang Xun are confident they believe, about to strangle the Han restoration in its cradle. They deploy siege engines, they dig assault ditches, they ring Kunyang with camp after camp of soldiers stretching for miles. Inside the walls, Lu Shu's colleagues want to abandon the town and scatter. Lu Shu argues them out of it. He proposes a plan that sounds like suicide. He himself will slip out of the city with a handful of horsemen. Roughly 13 ride through the enemy lines under cover of darkness, gather every rebel unit within a week's ride, and return with a relief force to hit the Shin army from the outside while the garrison sallies from the inside. On the night of the escape, he rides straight through 3 rings of enemy camps at a gallop and vanishes into the countryside. A few days later, he is back with roughly 3,000 additional troops he has scraped from the surrounding rebel garrisons. It is nothing compared to what he faces. He decides it will have to do. Lu Shu personally leads 1,000 Death Riders in the vanguard. He engages the Shin forces about 4 or 5 miles from Kunyang. In the opening moments, he cuts down dozens of enemy soldiers with his own hand. The rebel morale surges. Wang Yi and Wang Xun send 10,000 elite troops to crush him and give orders to the rest of their army to hold position, as they consider this only a nuisance to be cleared before the real siege resumes. That order will destroy them. Because when Lu Shu's 3,000 fanatics slam into the 10,000 elites and start winning the surrounding Jin units, under orders not to move, watch their comrades die and do nothing, Lu Shu personally kills Wang Xun in the melee. Wang Yi panics and runs. And then, as if on cue from heaven, the weather turns. A thunderstorm rolls in over the Jin army. Wind, torrential rain, lightning. Some later sources describe a meteor storm streaking across the sky during the battle, a portent read by superstitious Han troops as favor from heaven and by superstitious Shin troops as heaven's judgment. A flash flood rises in a nearby stream and drowns hundreds of fleeing men. The garrison of Kunyang, seeing dust and confusion in the imperial camp, sallies out from the gates and slams into the Jin rear. The imperial army does not break. It liquefies. Soldiers throw down weapons and run. The route stretches for 100 miles. Wang Yi escapes back to Luoyang with a few thousand men. The rest of the imperial host, hundreds of thousands of them, simply melt into the countryside and go home. They cannot be reassembled. The Xin dynasty is finished. Wang Mang himself is killed 3 months later in his own capital. Lu Shu will spend the next dozen years reconquering China. He will found the Eastern Han dynasty and reign for 32 years as Emperor Guangwu, one of the great restorers in Chinese history. Every step of that begins with 8,000 men holding a town against 400,000 in the summer of 23. That is number 5. A meteor storm, a suicide charge, a thunderstorm, and one dynasty founded on an afternoon that should not have been survivable. Number 4 leaves the settled river valleys of China entirely and rides north into a wilderness the Romans would not even have known how to describe. The date is January. 119 BC. The battlefield is Mobei, north of the Gobi Desert, in what is now Mongolia. The Han Emperor Wu has decided to finish the Xiongnu, the nomadic confederation that has raided the northern Chinese frontier for a century. And he is going to do it by launching the largest cavalry expedition the ancient world had ever seen into terrain no sedentary empire had ever attempted to cross. The scale of the logistics is what makes Mobei belong on this list. Emperor Wu conscripts 140,000 horses from private citizens. He mobilizes hundreds of thousands of infantry and civilian porters to move supplies. He forms 2 field armies of 50,000 elite cavalry each, plus tens of thousands of infantry to guard the baggage. He is going to send them 1,000 kilometers into the Gobi. To put that in perspective, a Roman army in Trajan's day was considered adventurous when it crossed the Danube for 3 weeks. Emperor Wu is sending 100,000 cavalry, plus horses, plus supplies, plus infantry, on a 1,000-kilometer journey through waterless desert into the heart of steppe nomad territory in the middle of winter. Nothing like it happens in the Mediterranean until Napoleon marches on Moscow. And Napoleon's army was not chasing an enemy that could move faster than his own. The 2 Han commanders are among the most famous names in Chinese military history. Wei Qing, the emperor's brother-in-law, a slave-born general who has risen to supreme command through sheer competence. Hulao Pass, Wei Qing's nephew, only 21 years old at the time of Mobei, a cavalry prodigy whose aggressive style has already made him a legend. The plan is two-pronged. Wei Qing marches out from Dingxiang. Hulao Pass marches from Dai, hundreds of miles to the east. Both push north through the Gobi to hit the Xiongnu heartland from different angles. The Xiongnu Chanyu, Yijichi, has been advised to withdraw beyond the Gobi in the belief that the Han will not dare follow. He is wrong. Wei Qing's column crosses the desert. His men and horses are on the verge of collapse when they emerge on the northern side and run straight into the Chanyu's main army. Wei Qing forms his exhausted cavalry into a defensive circle behind a ring of heavy wagons and fights all day. At sunset, a dust storm rises. Wei Qing throws his flanking cavalry out into the storm to envelop the Xiongnu position. In the confusion, the Chanyu himself flees with a few hundred horsemen. His army disintegrates. Han cavalry pursues them for 200 miles through the desert. Meanwhile, Hulao Pass column has struck the Xiongnu worthy king of the left in an entirely separate battle. Huo's elite horsemen kill 70,443 enemies by the tally, later recorded capture 3 Xiongnu lords and 83 nobles, and drive the survivors north to what is now Lake Baikal. He climbs Mount Langjushu and performs a Han sacrifice on the summit, marking the northernmost point ever reached by a Chinese imperial army. Casualties on both sides are enormous. Han losses in the campaign are estimated at 20% of the field force. The Xiongnu lose so many warriors and so many hundreds of thousands of head of livestock that they can no longer feed themselves in their traditional pastures. The Chanyu is forced to move his court hundreds of miles north. For the first time in a century, the northern frontier of China is quiet. The Silk Road opens, Han settlers pour into the Hexi corridor, the Xiongnu never fully recover, and within a couple of generations, the Confederation is fracturing. And all of it comes from an operation that no army in Roman military history ever attempted. Logistics, on a scale Rome never even conceived of. That is number 4. Number 3 brings us back to civil war and to one of the most cinematic endings in ancient history. The date is January 202 BC. The place is Gaixia, a walled camp about 20 miles east of what is now Guzhen in Anhui province. The last stand of Xiang Yu of Chu, the greatest warrior the Chinese world had produced since Sun Tzu, and the man who lost an empire because he could not stop believing he was invincible. Xiang Yu and Liu Bang have spent the last 4 years tearing China apart. The Qin dynasty collapsed after Xiang Yu's victories, and the 2 rebel generals promptly turned on each other. Liu Bang is the ex-village headman, cunning, patient, willing to be humiliated in the short term to survive the long term. Xiang Yu is the aristocrat's grandson, the physically overwhelming warrior, the man who at Julu 5 years earlier had ordered his soldiers to break their cauldrons and sink their boats, then broken a Qin army several times his own size. That was Julu, this is Gaixia. And at Gaixia, the aristocrat's grandson is finally definitively cornered. Xiang Yu has roughly 100,000 men in his fortified camp. Liu Bang has united with his generals Han Xin and Peng Yu and brought a combined army against him. Estimates range from 300,000 to 500,000 attackers. The Han army is deployed in 3 echelons. Han Xin, the strategic genius Liu Bang inherited when Xiang Yu let him slip through his fingers years earlier, commands the center. When Xiang Yu attacks, Han Xin's center gives ground on purpose. The Chu troops surge forward and get pinned in place by the flanks under Kang Ji and Chen He. Han Xin's center rotates back to the offensive. The Chu army breaks and falls back into the camp at Gaixia. And then Han Xin plays his psychological masterstroke. He orders his troops, many of whom were originally recruited from the old kingdom of Chu, to sing Chu folk songs in the night. The songs drift across the campfires into Xiang Yu's fortifications. To Xiang Yu, waking in the dark to hear the songs of his own homeland coming from every side, it can mean only one thing. All of Chu has fallen. His last supporters have gone over to the Han. He is alone. He is finished. This scene enters the Chinese language. To be surrounded on all sides by the songs of Chu becomes an idiom for being trapped in a hopeless situation. That night, Xiang Yu composes his own final poem, sings it with his consort Yu Ji at his side, and Yu Ji, refusing to be captured, kills herself with his sword. Then Xiang Yu does something that shows why he is the number 1 sword and the number 3 general in his own age. He assembles his last 800 elite cavalry. He does not surrender. He does not negotiate. He mounts his horse and rides straight out of Gaixia into the Han lines. The Han do not realize he is gone until dawn. When they do, 5,000 cavalry are sent in pursuit. Xiang Yu crosses the Huai River. By the time he reaches Yinling, he has 100 riders left. He gets lost, misled by a peasant. By the time he reaches Dongcheng, he has 28. Historians still remember the number. 28 riders. He divides them into 4 groups of 7. He tells them he will personally kill a Han general to prove his defeat is heaven's will, not his own failure. He does. Then he does it again. Then he does it a 3rd time. At the edge of the Wu River, an old ferryman offers to row him across so he can return to Chu and raise a new army. Xiang Yu refuses. He says he cannot face the fathers and elders of Chu after leading their sons to die. He turns his horse over to the ferryman. He fights the pursuing Han on foot until he is covered in wounds. Then he cuts his own throat with his sword. His body is torn apart by Han soldiers competing for the reward on his head. Liu Bang becomes emperor. The Han Dynasty is founded. It will rule China with 1 usurper's interruption for 400 years. And the character of Han rule, its emphasis on civility over swagger, on patience over glory, on the peasant villager over the aristocrat's grandson, will shape Chinese civilization all the way to the present. All of it flows out of Gaixia. Out of a night, when Xiang Yu heard Chu songs from every direction and decided that meant heaven had judged him. That is number 3. Number 2 is the battle that broke the Qin dynasty and made Xiang Yu into the legend he was at Gaixia. The date is January 207 BC. The place is Julu in what is now Hebei, and the moment defines the meaning of the phrase, "Burn your bridges better than anything before or since." The Qin dynasty is unraveling. The first emperor is dead. His son is a puppet. Uprisings have broken out across the country. The Qin general, Zhang Han, has already crushed 1 round of rebels by the time he crosses the Yellow River and marches north to besiege the rebel state of Zhao inside the walls of Julu. Zhang Han commands a Qin field army of $200,000 or more, backed up by another Qin general, Wang Li, with his own force ringed around the city. Total Qin forces in the area are variously estimated between 300,000 and 400,000. The rebel king of Zhao, trapped in Julu with a starving garrison, sends desperate messages south for help. Every rebel commander who receives one arrives within army camps at a safe distance and refuses to attack. They are waiting to see who dies first. The exception is Xiang Yu. His uncle Shang Liang has just been killed in an earlier battle. He himself commands a coalition army of roughly 50,000 Chu troops sent north under the nominal command of a hesitant general named Song Yi. When Song Yi refuses to advance and sits in camp for 40 days holding banquets while the Zhao die inside Julu, Xiang Yu walks into Song Yi's tent, cuts his head off, holds it up to the assembled officers, and announces that Chu now has one commander. He then leads his army to the banks of the Xiang River, crosses it, and orders his men to do three things: sink the boats, break the cauldrons, burn the tents. The order goes out through the whole army. The boats they used to cross the river are scuttled. The cooking pots are shattered. The camp huts are set on fire. Each soldier is given 3 days of rations and told there will be no more. They can win in 3 days or they can starve. The Qin commander Wang Li, watching this from a distance, laughs. He tells his own officers that Xiang Yu has committed suicide. He is wrong. What Xiang Yu has done is take away every possible mental exit from every man in his army. There is no retreat, there is no camp to return to, there is no meal at the end of a hard day. There is only victory or death. And when he throws them at the Qin siege lines, they fight with a fury the Qin have never encountered. 9 engagements over 3 days. The Chu win all 9. Wang Li's army is shattered. Wang Li himself is captured. Zhang Han withdraws with the surviving Qin forces and eventually surrenders his 200,000 men on terms. Xiang Yu, uncertain of their loyalty, has them buried alive at Xinan, another act of Qin-style mass execution that would come to define his reputation. But the moment that matters is the moment on the north bank of the Xiang River, when 50,000 men without pots, without boats, without tents, and with 3 days of food broke a Qin army several times their size and effectively ended the Qin dynasty. Julu is where the phrase to break the cauldrons and sink the boats enters the Chinese language as a permanent metaphor for total commitment. It is where a young Chu aristocrat became the greatest warrior of his era. And it is where the largest army the world had seen up to that moment was broken by an act of psychological engineering that made every soldier in it a fanatic. That is number 2. Number 1 is the battle that ends this ranking, not because it is the most cinematic, not because it changed the world the most, but because it is the largest and deadliest single military engagement of the ancient world by any reasonable measure, and its aftermath still haunts the earth. Bone pits from it are still being unearthed today. The date is 260 BC. The place is Changping, in what is now the vicinity of Gaoping, Shanxi. The battle is between the Qin and the Zhao, the 2 strongest of the 7 warring states of pre-imperial China. And the numbers, even reduced from their ancient exaggerations, are staggering. The state of Qin under King Zhao Shang has spent 3 generations reforming itself into a machine of war. Its farmers are conscripts. Its officers are promoted by heads taken in battle. Its economy exists to feed its army. The state of Zhao is the most military capable of the Eastern powers, home of the greatest general of the age, Lian Po, and a heavy cavalry tradition adapted from the northern steppe. When Qin annexes territory from a neighboring state and Zhao intervenes, the 2 giants slide into direct war. Both sides commit everything. Ancient sources say Qin fielded 550,000 men, Zhao fielded 450,000. Even if these figures are inflated by a factor of 2 or 3, we are talking about the largest concentration of military manpower anywhere in the world at that time. For 2 years, Lian Po holds Qin off with a war of attrition. He digs in behind fortifications, he refuses to give battle, he waits for Qin's supply lines to fail. It is the correct strategy. The king of Zhao does not have the patience for it. He replaces Lian Po with Zhao Kuo, the son of a famous general, a young man whose textbook mastery of military theory would give the Chinese language another idiom: armchair strategy. Qin, seeing Zhao Kuo has taken command, secretly rotates in its own most feared general, Bai Qi, the Lord of Wuan, the greatest killer of the warring states era, a general whose battle record over 30 years is so lethal that later Chinese emperors would forbid his name from being uttered in temples. Bai Qi springs a trap immediately. He feigns weakness. Zhao Kuo advances aggressively out of his fortifications. Bai Qi encircles him, cuts his supply lines, and settles down to starve him. For 46 days. Zhao Kuo's army is trapped, cut off from food, cut off from water, cut off from reinforcement. Records describe the troops slaughtering their horses, then eating leather, then finally eating each other. Zhao Kuo attempts a desperate breakout at the head of his best cavalry and is shot dead by Qin archers. On the 47th day, roughly 400,000 surviving Zhao soldiers surrender. And this is where Changping becomes not just the largest battle of the ancient world, but one of the most infamous atrocities in human history. Bai Qi calculates. He cannot feed 400,000 prisoners. He cannot march them back to Qin. He cannot release them, because they will simply reform under new commanders and fight again. He cannot execute them. One by one, his own army would be exhausted, his weapons blunted. So he does what Chinese military historians have argued about for over 2,000 years. He orders every Zhao prisoner buried alive in pits dug into the surrounding valleys. Only 240 of the youngest soldiers are spared, released to walk back to Zhao and spread the terror. Every other man is thrown into the pits. Over several days in the autumn of 260 BC, the great mass grave of Changping is filled with living men. The estimated Zhao dead across the entire campaign, including the breakout attempts and the mass execution, reaches 450,000. Qin dead are estimated at 250,000. The combined casualty figure of 650,000 to 700,000 places Changping among the deadliest single battles in the history of warfare, ancient or modern. Bai Qi himself, according to a story preserved in later Chinese sources, is reported to have wept afterwards, saying that the killing was so vast it had broken something inside him. He would live only a few more years before being forced to commit suicide on the orders of his own king. The Zhao state never recovered. Its military strength was permanently crippled. Qin would spend another 40 years mopping up the remaining warring states, but the direction of Chinese history was set on the field of Changping. In 221 BC, the king of Qin would proclaim himself Shi Huangdi, the first emperor uniting China for the first time in its history. The Great Wall, the standardization of writing the imperial system that would last 2,100 years. All of it descends in a direct line from an autumn afternoon when Bai Qi looked at 400,000 kneeling prisoners and did the math. The Yanglu #1 mass grave site in Gaoping still yields human bones, weapons, and armor fragments today. In the Tang Dynasty, an emperor built a temple of bones over the execution site. Farmers plowing the fields still turn up skeletons in the 21st century. Cannae killed 60,000 to 70,000 Romans in a day. Changping killed roughly that number of Zhao soldiers on the day of surrender alone, and then buried 400,000 more over the days that followed. The scale is not merely larger than Cannae, it is on a different order of magnitude. When you set them side by side, Cannae is a large tactical defeat. Changping is a state-terminating event on the scale of Hiroshima. And Hiroshima, at least, ended in a few minutes. Changping took nearly 50 days of siege, and then several more days of methodical execution. That is number 1. 10 battles. Panipat, where a single afternoon on the plains of Haryana killed 100,000, including the follow-on massacres. Talas, where a defection on a Central Asian river sent paper west and Islam east. Hulao Pass, where 3,500 cavalry destroyed 100,000 in a single morning and won a dynasty. Fei River, where 800,000 men killed themselves with a rumour. Red Cliffs, where a chained fleet burned in a winter wind and a country split into 3. Kunyang, where a meteor storm, a suicide charge, and a thunderstorm birthed the Eastern Han. Mobei, where 100,000 Chinese cavalry rode 1,000 kilometers into the Gobi and hunted down an empire. Gaixia, where Chusongs rose from every side of the camp, and the greatest warrior of his age chose the sword over the ferry. Julu, where an army without cauldrons broke a Qin host several times its own size in 3 days. Changping, where 400,000 men were buried alive, and China as we know it began. Cannae still deserves its place in the memory of warfare. 60,000 Roman dead in an afternoon remains a horror the human mind cannot easily absorb. But the mind that stops at Cannae is looking at the ancient world through only one window. Open the other windows. Look east across the steppe. Look south into the Yangtze Valley. Look north to the mountains where the Xiongnu wintered. Look down at the mass graves the farmers still plow up in Shaanxi. The ancient world was doing things on a scale the Mediterranean simply never approached. Bigger battles, bigger armies, bigger casualty lists, bigger consequences. Cannae was one afternoon of unspeakable slaughter. These 10 battles were the afternoons that decided which civilizations would inherit the world, and they killed with a lavishness that makes Cannae look, in comparison, almost restrained. If this ranking changed the way you think about the scale of ancient warfare, hit that like button. Every like tells YouTube to push this video to more history lovers who deserve to hear these stories. Hit subscribe so you never miss the next deep dive. Turn on the bell so the notification arrives the moment we upload. Drop a comment right now. Tell us which of these battles surprised you the most. Tell us which one you had never heard of before today. Tell us where in the world you are watching from. Our audience spans every continent, and every single one of you keeps this channel alive. Thank you for watching. These battles deserve to be remembered, not just as numbers on a chart, but as the moments that shaped the world we still live in.